Today I want to discuss the key points of the series, so that if you name them, everyone in the room immediately understands you are talking about heroes of the Might and Magic series. I do believe the Olden Era will be a continuation of those very same heroes. It just remains to figure out what those same actually means. I also think that to understand this we need to look beyond the games I listed earlier. For example, Dark Museum of Might and Magic takes place in the same universe and by itself is a decent game. When I tried playing it again on my Steam Deck, it surprised me twice. First, because although it uses Valve's Source engine, it was refusing to launch for several hours. Second time, because at one point I unexpectedly knocked out a plank out of my enemy. And wow, you can do this too? I see an interesting point that such an old game can teach current generation games how to do a good level interaction. And you can imagine... Yeah, you might say it's a different genre, fair enough. Let's talk about Songs of Conquest, which has a similar resource system, castle building, map exploration and battles on a hex grid. It is a wonderful spiritual successor that even tries to refine some aspects of the series. However, it feels like a different game, a good one, but a different one, despite being as close as possible. But being inspired by the Hero series doesn't mean that this game is a part of it. So let's get back to the main topic. Okay, let's discuss some rules for this video. When I talk about the Hero series, I'm referring to Hero 3, 4 and 5. As well as a board game based on the third game, and the confirmed elements from the Olden Era. I'll be bending these rules a little here and there, but I hope you'll agree with me in the end. Before we move on, I suggest you write down the key things that define the series for you, whatever they may be. Let's see how many of them match my choices. Let's start with units. Almost any top tier unit can claim the title of series icon, but I chose two of the most signature creatures. These creatures were presented in every part of the series. Their design and abilities can define an entire faction. First up are the Black Dragons. They are the most powerful units in the Dungeon faction, or its equivalent in later games. Besides having extremely high stats and a mysterious hatred for Titans, they have their defining trait, complete immunity to spells. In Heroes 3, this magic immunity enables them to shrug everything from mass slow to implosion, allowing cunning players to employ the infamous Armageddon tactic without worrying about friendly fire. Because so few other creatures can survive Armageddon's area-wide destruction, entire strategies revolve around putting a stack of black dragons, casting the mass spell, and laughing as the rest of the map is left in ruins. It's the kind of high-risk, high-reward style that resonates with fans looking for those moments of incomparable coolness. In Heroes 4 they remain true to their nature, fearsome damage, robust hit points, and that ever-valuable immunity to magical threats. Heroes 4 messes things up by letting heroes fight on the battlefield, which paradoxically made black dragons both more and less dominant at the same time. More dominant, because hero spells could neutralize them, but somewhat less because certain hero builds could challenge their supremacy. Within the Asylum faction, dragons compete with Hydras for the title of most powerful unit. But let's be honest, the coolness and iconic status of black dragons is in a league of its own. In Heroes 5, dragons became even more significant in the storyline, serving as creators and deities of that world. The units in each faction are not true dragons themselves, but their offspring. The black dragons got a slightly new design, blending reptilian ferocity with the dark elf aesthetic and highlighting the game's transition to fully 3D models and smoother animations. This time black dragons could terrorize late-game enemies, especially when paired with a skilled warlock hero using destructive magic. Olden Era brings dragons back as the strongest unit in their faction. In addition to their core attributes, they have an alternate form called Ashen. In Heroes 5, the alternate choice was the Red Dragon, introduced in the second expansion, allowing you to drop magic immunity in exchange for more offensive power. In the new game, the choice will be between inspiring hope or diving straight into enemy lines. In the board game version, the majestic black dragon adorns the rulebook, and its signature ability is preserved. Even more importantly, it's one of the 3 factions included in the retail starter set. In all these versions, this unit defines the faction, synergizes well with mass magical attacks, and is a strong flying fighter even without any magical tricks. Their main problem in the games is that immunity prevents them from being buffed or resurrected. The other unit that's just as iconic as the Black Dragon is the Archangel. And if the dragon graces the rulebook cover, the angel decorates the box of the board game itself. Archangels have always been the pinnacle of righteous power, especially in the castle or haven factions across different installments. Even more than that is their trademark resurrection ability, which lets them bring back allied units that have fallen during the same battle. In Heroes 3, they stand out as tier 7 creatures with exceptional stats, 250 hit points, high damage, and blistering speed that usually grants them the first strike. What makes them even more impressive is how far they can move across the battlefield, punishing slower troops and ranged units before they can do much of anything. They also boost the morale of friendly troops. At the same time, Archangels are the most expensive unit, costing 5,000 gold and 3 gems compared to 4,000 and 2 sulfur for black dragons. Only Titans can somehow match them in hiring cost. One good early game strategy is raiding a Griffin Conservatory to earn an angel early in the game. We won't dive into the deep lore of Heroes 3, where Paul Ratner, as the scenario writer, proposed that angels were complex robots created by the ancients to hunt down and destroy the Kriegans, whom you might know as Inferno demons. We'll leave that for the most meticulous fans. By Heroes 5, Archangels returned to their iconic role in the Haven faction, appearing as upgraded seraphs at the highest tier with refined visuals and a more modern design. Their resurrection ability was limited to only one use per battle, which made their employment more strategic. Archangels came to represent disciplined strength and divine might, which is emphasized by their animations. I was a bit confused, as I was sure Archangels were on the cover of Heroes 5, but apparently that was Heroes 6. That 6th installment continued to explore the lore of Ashan and portrayed angels in a grey moral area, as they are willing to defeat demons and the faceless at any costs. In the board game, the Archangel's ability was interpreted as saving allies from death rather than resurrecting them, so there was no need to introduce a separate resurrection mechanic. The board game doesn't have a resurrection system, so defeated units can be removed from the board. In Olden Era, the castle faction wasn't showcased in full detail, at least not at the time of the video editing. However, on the published screenshot, we already can see the unit with wings and the Heaven Gate as a town building. Beyond their raw stats and abilities, Archangels symbolize the grandiose, almost mythic tone that Heroes of Might and Magic strives for. Their majestic presence, often accompanied by triumphant music, reinforces the notion that Castle Haven is favored by divine power. Before moving on, let's talk about those I did not include, though I considered them. At first I considered listing only units, but later abandoned this idea. I almost included the Archdevil when talking about the third game, or Archdemons from 5th to oppose Archangels, giving us that classic rivalry. In Heroes 5 they played a major role in the story and greeted Blair at the main menu, endlessly fighting an Inquisitor. But 3 things argued against including them. First, the inconsistency of their design, which leaves different impressions in different installments. They're slender tempters in Heroes 3, satyr-like in the board game, and massive, beast-like creatures in Heroes 5. In the board game, they actually remind me of Warcraft's fire druids. Second, they're not even in the base set of the board game, which makes you question their role in the series. The final and main reason was the recent trailer for Olden Era showing that the Inferno faction has been replaced by a swarm of demonic insects, leaving no room for the old Archdevil incarnations in this list. Another set of units that didn't make the cut includes leeches, vampires, hydras and knights.
Hey, stop! Bronislav, are you sure this is the right footage?
Another set of units that didn't make the cut includes leeches, vampires, hydras and knights, although knights often appear in the game's artwork. All of them are memorable within specific installments, and many appear in all or almost all entries in the series. But units with similar features exist in other games like Elder Scrolls or Warcraft. As for the Hydra, I associate it mainly with games set in ancient Greece, such as Titan Quest.
Phil? What do you call that thing?
Let's move on. I've already spoiled one of the most iconic spells, the Armageddon. This spell is infamous for dealing damage to all troops on the battlefield, whether friend or friend or... In Heroes 3, Armageddon became legendary thanks to its ingenious combination with fire magic immune creatures. Not just with the black dragons I mentioned earlier, but also with Ifrits, Phoenixes and fire elementals. Let's not forget that it was the Armageddon's blade and the Sword of Frost that led to a major plot twist, shifting the story into the world of Heroes 4. In Heroes 5, Armageddon remains a top-tier destructive magic spell, and pairing it with Dungeon's black dragons is a time-honored strategy. Warlocks, with their mastery of destructive magic, can boost Armageddon's damage to brutal levels, sometimes wiping out entire armies in a single cast. Of course, there's always a catch. If you don't have an army consisting of immune creatures only, you risk crippling your own forces in the process. And despite that Dungeons faction heroes can ignore enemy resistances, I personally like this tactic even more when playing as the fortress. In Olden Era, Armageddon keeps its explosive nature, now featuring Ephesus streaking phoenix animation, a visual spectacle, and a reminder of its destructive power. As for the tabletop version, there's currently no spell as devastating as Armageddon. The closest equivalent would be the Inferno spell, available to the Inferno faction. Wait for it, Inferno. Perhaps it will be added later along with the Conflux faction, which has already been announced as an expansion. Picking a single adventure map structure to symbolize the series was a real challenge. Before revealing my choice, I want to acknowledge a couple of structures that almost made the cut. First, the subterranean gate, which looked ominously grand in Heroes 3, but was reduced to a rather bland staircase in Heroes 5. Second, the windmill or water wheel requires players to complete mandatory weekly resource collection runs. But for me, the most iconic structure has to be Dragon Utopia. First introduced in Heroes 3, these hidden vaults offer massive rewards, heaps of gold, rare resources, and top-tier artifacts if you can survive a brutal battle against multiple types of dragons. And let's not forget, dragons are among the strongest units in the game. Red, green, gold, and black dragons often appear in merciless combinations. Players typically stumble upon a Dragon Utopia mid-campaign, weighing the risk of losing half their army against the promise of game-changing loot. I have to admit, Dragon Utopia in Heroes 4 left no lasting impression on me. It was called Dragon City, just like in the first two games, and only contained one dragon type, my personal favorite, the Black Dragons. In the tabletop version, Dragon Utopia is the primary objective in cooperative mode, where players must conquer it together, facing an elite force of Azure and Ruby dragons in the base game setup. Heroes 5 carried on the tradition. Let me tell you a quick story. I found a Dragon Utopia right in the center of the map. Thinking I had built a solid army, I confidently attacked, expecting an easy victory. Instead, I got completely wrecked, losing all my weaker units and cursing the dragon's high initiative. After reloading my last save, I reconsidered my approach. 3 weeks of army building later, I finally emerged victorious, rewarded with powerful artifacts and a hefty gold bonus. But would I have risked it in multiplayer where there's no saves coming? No way. I would have just swallowed my pride and moved on like nothing happened. Aside from conquering Dragon Utopia, another major objective in the tabletop game is the Grail. The Grail hunt is also one of the most defining aspects of the series. In the tabletop version, it serves as a MacGuffin without providing an actual in-game benefit. In the PC games, the Grail is sometimes the main mission objective, while in others, it's a crucial element that can turn the tide of battle. In the Heroes series, searching for the Grail involves scouring the map, visiting obelisks that gradually reveal a puzzle map with its location. Once you find the exact spot, you have to dig it up and bring it back to a town to construct a unique building. The benefits of this building vary by faction. My personal favorite is the Academy's Grail structure, the skyship, which reveals the entire adventure map. Another standout is the Grail for the Conflux faction, which, true to its incredibly balanced nature, and yes, that sarcasm, allows heroes to learn every available spell. The Grail hunt often turns into a race, with AI players in Heroes 3 surprisingly adept at finding and digging it up before you do. In Heroes 5, the biggest change to the Grail is its rebranding as the Tier of Asha. Its core mechanics remain unchanged: collect map fragments, pinpoint the location, and construct an ultimate building in your town. That said, I feel like it lost some of its magic. The bonuses are more generic now. Academy's airship no longer reveals the entire map, but instead provides a dull 10 knowledge bonus to the defending hero. And with the transition to large-scale 3D town models, the Grail structure no longer stands out visually like it did in previous games. Another defining element of the series is its music. The soundtrack is yet another thing that makes Heroes of Might and Magic stand out. I actually started writing about how it evolves from game to game, but trying to describe music with words is a next level challenge. And that's coming from someone who recently took down Radan's Consort and finished The Witcher on Death March difficulty. So rather than breaking down each game's soundtrack, I'd much rather encourage you to listen to these incredible tracks yourself. My personal favorites are the battle theme from Heroes 3 and the Necropolis theme from Heroes 5. On a side note, I'd love to get my hands on a vinyl record of the Heroes 3 soundtrack, but apparently you either need to have the fastest draw in the Wild West or the income of a Redanian king. The series' longtime composer, Paul Anthony Romero, has not only scored the main games, but also composed the Factory Town theme for the fan expansion Horn of the Abyss. The soundtrack for Olden Era is being developed through a collaboration between
Hello, I am Paul Romero
and
Chris Velasco.
which gives me hope that the new installment will continue the series' musical legacy. Equally iconic, if more whimsical, is the familiar phrase Astrologers proclaim, which echoes throughout Heroes of Might and Magic 3 at the start of each new week or month. These simple announcements signal shifts in the world's balance, introducing events like the Week of the Imp, which doubles Inferno's low-tier creature production, or the dreaded Month of the Plague, which severely reduces creature growth and can disrupt carefully planned recruitment cycles. This mechanic adds some unpredictability, but in reality, its variations are quite limited. In Heroes of Might and Magic 5, this mechanic evolved by abandoning monthly events while making weekly events far more diverse. The different types of weeks can be categorized as follows: where nothing happens, often accompanied by humorous messages, such as Week of the Rabbit, not a good week to be a carrot. Resource production weeks. These either double the production of a specific resource or reduce all resource production. Adventuring weeks. These modify hero movement on the map, make hiring neutral creatures easier, or lower the cost of upgrading units. In combat weeks, these boost a faction's initiative by 20%, modify mana regeneration, or enhance a specific school of magic. What used to be the Week of the Plague in Heroes 3 has now been expanded into a separate category with 3 escalating stages: Week of the Plague, Week of Disease, and Week of Fever. Each of these progressively reduces creature growth and affects the number of units available in dwellings. However, to counterbalance these negative weeks, 2 beneficial weeks were introduced. Week of Life doubles creature growth for all factions, and a Week of Conjunction, which triples creature growth and triples income from all mines and towns. The final category is Creatures Weeks, which functions similarly to Heroes 3, doubling the growth of a specific unit type and spawning neutral stacks of that unit across the map. In addition to classification by type, weeks can also be split into 2 categories: symmetric and asymmetric events. Some weeks affect all players equally, while others grant a significant advantage, such as doubling the growth of your strongest unit or boosting the magic school your main hero specializes in. In the tabletop adaptation, the concept of weekly events has been altered. Instead of occurring every in-game week, astrologers now influence every second turn, alternating between a resource turn and an astrology event turn. In the base game, all but one of the astrology events apply symmetrically to all players. The exception is Week of the Fancy Pixie, which grants a morale bonus but not to Necropolis. In Heroes 5, nearly a quarter of events, 30 out of 127, do nothing while in the tabletop game. This happens in just 1 out of 19 rounds. And with expansions introducing new cards, this chance decreases even further to 1 in 28. Here, an astrology event can significantly impact the game, whether by enabling the recruitment of a neutral creature or influencing battlefield conditions. And of course, the iconic phrase Astrologers proclaim is not only an essential part of the series, but it is practically a meme creator. Before moving to the last point in my list, I would like to make some horrible mentions. A map editor and the random map generator, which were brutally cut from HD Complete Edition of Heroes 3. Fortress sieges where catapults stubbornly miss their targets every turn, archers on towers pick off your troops, and every treasure chest forces the agonizing choice between gold and experience. Of course, no discussion of the Heroes series would be complete without mentioning the late game imbalance that has become an integral part of the franchise. This issue stems from the army gathering mechanics. In the first week, all players are on equal footing fighting neutral creatures, leveling up their heroes and gathering resources. But by week 3 or 4, you're fielding an army of 10 dragons, which most other units struggle to compete with. At that point, the only real challenge comes from another main hero. If they have 10 angels to match your dragons. At that point, the game becomes a race to stack even more high-tier creatures. Neutral stacks inside enemy heroes alike become mere speed bumps, unable to challenge your growing power. This is precisely why the Necropolis faction or its synergy with certain artifacts were banned in tournaments. Its ability to snowball through skeleton raising was overwhelming, turning every battle into an opportunity for exponential growth. With the Cloak of the Undead King, the advantage was ridiculously overpowered. Raising leeches instead of skeletons created an unstoppable force. Heroes 5 started with the same problem, but later in the DLCC, it reworked the system. It tried to address this in its expansions by introducing a limit on the number of undead units raised. This was tied to hero progression and a faction-specific resource called Dark Energy. This system sets a shared limit on the undead you can raise and requires you to defeat units of the same tier. Only druids or mages can be raised as leashes, etc. However, even with this fix, 2 major problems remain. First, the snowball effect, though in this case, it's more like a butterfly effect. Losing a single skeleton in an early fight might seem insignificant, but a few battles later, that missing skeleton doesn't finish off an enemy knight. The knight then kills a lich, reducing your damage output. Eventually this chain reaction means you fall just short of killing the last Black Dragon, who, thanks to a luck proc, wipes out your last units. The second problem is the near impossibility of making a comeback. Losing a battle doesn't just mean losing artifacts and giving experience to the enemy hero. It also means your army is gone, and rebuilding it takes weeks, but while you're struggling to recover, your opponent is still reinforcing their forces with the survivors from the last fight. No matter how hard you try, you won't get a fair rematch. I don't know if the developers of Olden Era will ever see this video, but I'm concerned that their new installment will suffer from the same fundamental issue. So, what can be done about it? Interestingly, the board game adaptation of Heroes tackled this problem quite effectively. Overwhelming the opponent with sheer numbers is no longer an option. First, you can only bring 5 out of your 7 unit types into battle. Second, there's no mixing and matching creatures. From different factions you're limited to your own unit pool, with only rare chances to recruit neutral creatures. Finally, stack sizes are capped at pack level. This means that once you've recruited and upgraded Archangels or Black Dragons, no matter how many turns pass, your army won't get any stronger. The old stack 1000 dragons and burn everything down in one breath strategy simply doesn't work anymore. The board game also addresses the comeback problem in a similar way. If you've saved enough resources, you can immediately re-recruit units after a defeat and go for a rematch. And to make the victory feel rewarding, winning a battle grants you 15 gold, a hero level and a victory point. Another game tackling this issue is Songs of Conquest, a spiritual successor to Heroes. I haven't spent nearly as much time with it as I have with Heroes, but its core solution is simple, limiting the maximum number of units in a stack. In Heroes terms, imagine if a stack couldn't have more than 10 angels. You could still technically recruit 70 angels, but at that point managing them would become only a deep late game problem. So what can be done within the Heroes framework to mitigate this issue without losing what makes the series unique? A simple first step would be to introduce stack limits based on monthly creature growth. To further enhance this, I suggest a high-level perk where heroes gain an ability that increases their stack limit by 25% of the monthly growth. If we wanted to go even further, instead of capping individual stack sizes, we could introduce an overall army limit. In this case, your total army might be restricted to say 10 angels across all stacks. Other ideas, which might not be so series changing, is about lowering the power of big stacks via morale or initiative penalty. The other proposal is to provide fractional bonuses for the right stacks divisions. All the examples I've mentioned change slightly from game to game, yet they remain instantly recognizable, whether it's the board game, Heroes 5 transitioning the series into 3D, or even Olden Era trying to bring back familiar elements in a new format. Heroes have always evolved, but it has never lost its essence, and that's what truly makes them the same heroes. Some of the things I've talked about have already been confirmed by the developers, while others we're still waiting to see. The real question remains, will we get those heroes with the same recognizable emotions from the moment you start playing? Or will we end up with a game that looks like them, set in the same world, but somehow feels like something entirely different? Time will tell, but I hope the magic of the series will work once again.
Thanks for watching, and до widzenia!